All right, thanks, Lisa. Well, we'll start right away. If you guys have questions when I'm going through, just you can put them in the Q&A, yeah, we'll just start talking about insects. So first of all, we know there are insects around, but some people don't really understand how many insects there are out there. So here is just a diagram of all the animals on Earth. And if you look at this, this is all insects, part of it. And here's all the other arthropods. So as you can see, insects, not only just numbers wise, but biomass, everything, they are far and away the most common animals out there. So what is an insect? There's three main things and a couple other things that distinguish what an insect is. First one's external exoskeleton. So that's, the hard part around insects most people know about. Insects, they do have to shed their exoskeleton to get larger. So whenever you see cicadas or dragonflies or anything like that shedding their skin, it's actually what their skeleton what holds everything together. Now it's not always rigid. You do have, grubs and maggots and stuff. Those are still insects and they still have that exoskeleton. It's just more of a, membranous thing so they can grow more easily. And the body's segmented. That's arthropod actually means jointed foot. So they've got head, thorax, and an abdomen. 3 body parts. That's what makes an insect versus, some of the other arthropods I'm going to talk about. And they've also got 3 pairs of segmented legs. So classic look here on this beetle. But they also can be modified or reduced. So sometimes they turn into crazy things like this leaf leg bug, or in the mole crickets, these things are used to dig really well. So there's a lot of different ways they can use those legs. It's not always just a simple body plan. Now, those are the 3 things all insects have. They usually also have wings. They're the only arthropods with wings. So if you ever see an invertebrate with wings, it's got to be an insect. Now, some orders don't have them, and some individuals don't have them. So it is not guaranteed, but if they have it, it's an insect. Now, one thing I wanted to talk about before we get into the nitty-gritty of insects is insect decline. So it's hard to quantify. We know that insects have decreased, but nobody thought to look at insects when there were a lot of them, so we don't know how many there were to start with. And, it depends where you're at, how far they've gone down. But between 25 and 80% of all insects have disappeared in the last 50 years. So that's pretty remarkable. And this is just a graph from a particular study, but it kind of captures the trend. And the reasons are hard to isolate. You do have a few that, we know. Habitat loss, as with anything, I mean, we're taking up a lot of space, modifying it so they don't have it anymore. And of course, pesticides and herbicides. Pesticides kill them right out, and then the herbicides kill the plants that they need. So really knocking them back. And because of this, it's no surprise why, birds, bats, and other animals have also had precipitous declines. I'm sure a lot of people have heard about, the third of all birds have disappeared since the last 50 years. And so habitat loss, other things obviously are to blame, but loss of food is really gonna, take out a lot of individuals as well. Now, one thing I want to talk about was the windshield phenomenon. And it's a way to kind of put in perspective insects, because you're like, I still see insects. You do, but maybe not as many. So the windshield phenomenon is the name for an actual description of how many insects used to be on windshields and how many are now. So I'm not that old, and when I was younger, I mean, this windshield is more like what I would be used to. Now I hardly ever have to clean it for bugs, at least. And so that's a way that, if you don't really understand how many have been lost, just think about that. So one thing, I was going to take a quick poll and say how many people have actually noticed that, or maybe if you hadn't, now that I pointed it out, or you're like, oh my gosh, that's true. So just take a minute and vote on this if you want.
Wow. We got a few more people voting, Shawn, and then we'll go ahead and end the poll.
All right.
So you're gonna see that the results are pretty staggering there.
Yep. And that's what, you know, I would expect. You know, maybe some places don't notice as much, but I was up in Northern Virginia, kind of West Virginia, a couple of years ago, and our windshield just got covered. And when we thought about it, they don't use a lot of pesticides in the area we were at. So we were like, huh. So it is something, and if you don't notice it, then, you know, maybe just, you know, just think about the next time you actually have to clean your windshield for those bugs, and if it's different than it used to be. All right, so we're just gonna start talking about the actual animals themselves. First, we're gonna do not insects. So first one, a lot of people, you know, when you're looking for insects, you see these guys a lot, the millipedes. They're generally going to be slow when you turn over the logs, not moving too fast. They are going after decaying matter, so don't have to worry about them biting you or anything. And they've got 2 pairs of legs on these segments, so they've got a lot more legs than like the centipedes do, but not a million, contrary to the name. And a lot of them secrete chemicals for defense. Since they are slow, they need some way to defend themselves. Now, I'm going to go over a few observations after each one of the orders I'm talking about. So one of the ones people submitted on iNaturalist were the American giant millipede. So you guys are pretty common, especially a little bit higher in the mountains. They get pretty big. They can get up to 10 inches, and they live for up to 10 years. So some people even have them as pets. So they're going to stick around. One interesting thing is that the female lays 1 egg and then she curls around it. So unlike a lot of arthropods, they're not laying a lot of eggs. They're just doing 1 and protecting it. Now, as soon as it hatches, she leaves it. But, you know, that's still a lot more parental care than most insects. And these guys are poisonous. Nothing that's going to be too bad, but just if you pick one up, make sure you wash your hands. Another species was Rhodoloria tramaculata. I didn't know this particular species, but it's one of the flat-backed millipedes, very common in our region. There's, I don't know, 50 or more species, pretty common.
Is that the one we know of as, yep, the cherry millipede?
Yes, yeah. So this guy smells like almonds or cherries. Does anybody know why it smells like that? Can we?
Anybody want to raise their hand? They think they might know, and you can chat and answer.
Chat, either way.
Got a couple of hand grades. Bruce Grimes knows.
Yep, Bruce got it right away. So cyanide. So these guys, like a lot of millipedes, they have cyanide as their chemical, and then when you shake them up a little bit, they release it, and that's what that smell is. Same thing as in cherries. So just a cool little thing you can do, and again, not harmful as long as you don't lick your hands or eat the animal. All right, so then centipedes, close relatives to the millipedes. They are fast because they're predators. So they're, you know, if you flip over a log, they're going to be moving pretty fast. They've just got the 1 pair of legs per segment. And the first pair of legs has been modified so it can actually inject venom. So these guys, they will bite. Now, a few of the ones that were submitted, house centipede. These are harmless to people. They freak a lot of people out. They're very leggy. I think they're really cool. I'm always excited when I see one because I don't see one that often. Originally native to the Mediterranean, so not from around here, but they do hunt other arthropods. So if you find them in your house, it's because they're eating other insects. So they're not bad, harmless to you. If you don't like them, then, you know, it's the other insects that are bringing them in. And then another centipede was a Lithobius, another genus that has like 50 species in it. They've got some wicked jaws on them. I don't pick up centipedes generally when I'm out looking for insects. So I wouldn't suggest doing it either unless you want a nasty bite. All right, now going a few more non-insects, the arachnids. I figure everybody knew they're they've got 8 legs is what distinguishes them from insects, and only 2 body parts. A few of the common ones around here: spiders, the ticks and the mites, and the harvest minnow daddy longlegs. And contrary to what most people think, those guys aren't spiders. They're a different order altogether. So whenever you see them, that's, you know, it's not a spider. It is an arachnid, but not a spider. All right, so a few of the ones that have been submitted: Trombidium, velvet mite, another huge genus. So they all look about like this. So pretty common in leaf litter and stuff. 6-spotted orb weaver. It's one of the common spiders. Gets its name from those 6 spots. One of the web spinners, the ones that actually spin webs. Now, the dark fishing spider. A lot of people don't like these because if you've ever been walking along a stream or something and you said, "Oh my gosh, it's a giant spider on that tree," it's probably one of these or one of their close relatives. They can get quite large, 4 or so inches across. Don't want anything to do with you, of course, but it can be surprising. And another one was the bull jumping spider. I really like jumping spiders. They've got just crazy patterning on them. They do a lot of signaling back and forth with either their pedipalps or these bright jaws. So a lot of them are very small, but if you can get close enough to look at those colors, it's quite beautiful on a lot of them. And both of these guys aren't web spinners. They both can produce silk and use it for different things, but they don't make webs. Now back to insects. Just real quick, we're going to go over the difference between a few different ways insects grow up. So hemimetabolous. That means that they're going from an egg to a nymph to adult. So basically, like these bugs here, they have the young have these little buds where the wings are going to grow out when they're adults. But other than that, they look like the adults, just a little bit smaller. That's why it's also called incomplete metamorphosis. And so a lot of the orders do this. It's a simpler way to go. Now, one group that can be difficult to figure out if they actually are hemimetabolists is the aquatic insects. So technically, this dragonfly is not, it doesn't go through complete metamorphosis. And you might be like, well, this doesn't look very much like an adult dragonfly. And you're right, but if you really look at it, it's already got the wing buds. The abdomen's shorter, it does elongate, so that throws some people off. But other than that, it's, you know, it has those legs like normal. The body plan's pretty similar. So it is hemimetabolous. And another one are these cicadas. Now, these are the periodical or 17-year cicadas, and everybody should take a good look at these because in a few months, you're probably going to be seeing a lot of them. This year is the emergence year for the Southwest Virginia brood. And just flipping over logs and digging in the past month or two, I've been digging up insects themselves and their burrows. And you can tell these from the other cicadas because even as nymphs, they've got these bright red eyes. So they'll be coming soon, and there will be millions and millions of them. So
what does the burrow look like? Can you see it now?
The what?
Underground. Does the burrow come? Can you see a burrow now?
Yeah, a lot of places you can see a burrow now, and it's a hole. It's about, you know, just about that big. And a lot of times, if you look into it, you can actually see their eyes looking back at you. So, yeah, if you take the sawed off of something, or again lift up a log, a lot of times you'll see it right in there. So, cool. Yeah, if you try that out, you should be able to see some of those. And come probably June, early June, late June, depending, they'll be coming out. All right, then we got the holometabolous, which means complete metamorphosis. So this one's going from egg to larva to pupa and then the adult. So this is what you think of as the grub, you know, and then it goes into this pupal stage where it's pretty crazy. If you have some time, you want to read about it. I'm not going to get into it here, but they actually just liquefy inside their pupal case, and then their cells recombine in a different way. So it's not like different body parts just grow a little different, like the whole thing changes. And then eventually they'll come out and they'll, you know, look totally different than the larva did. Okay, So now you know how some of these guys are formed. We're going to go into a couple orders, several orders, and then also most of these orders there have been observations for. One or two I put on even though there weren't observations just because they're pretty common. But we'll just go through them and see what you recognize. So Ephemeroptera, the mayflies. These guys are aquatic as nymphs, and they're going to have 3 long filaments on their abdomens. So you can see both of these guys, mayflies, very different looking, but they've still got those 3 filaments. They've got gills on the side of their abdomen down here. There's the other one that kind of looks like them, the stoneflies have them in another location. Now the adults. Now Ephemeroptera, they get their name because they are ephemeral. Once they come out, they're only out for a very short period of time because their mouth parts are fused. So once they emerge, they can't eat. So they can only last as long as the fat they've stored up as nymphs. So they're going to last anywhere from a day to at the most a week and a half. And then after that, you know, they just run out of fuel. Oh, and there was one mayfly that was observed, but it only got down to order, so I won't get into that one.
Was that might have been mine? Was it red?
I just saw that it was a mayfly was the order. I didn't look.
Yeah, I couldn't figure it out, but it was red. Allie and I caught it in the creek back here Friday. It was amazing.
I think I looked at it and it was a it's one of the family is the stream mayflies. So
Gotcha.
yeah, they pretty common and fairly small. All right, so the Odonata, the dragonflies and damselflies, very conspicuous order. Another one where the nymphs are aquatic. Now these guys have this interesting mouth part here, and it's actually got jaws on a stalk. It's called the labium, and they use this to capture prey. And the movement is actually faster than the human eye can process. So if you're watching one of these guys hunt, when it actually grabs what is in front of it, you'll just see it in front of it, and then it'll be in its mouth. Like we can't, it's just too fast. Now the adults, also predatory. They got short antennae like a lot of the other flyers, and no filaments on the abdomen. You know, obviously damselflies, they're the slighter of the two, keep their wings folded on their back when they land, and dragonflies a little bit more robust and open their wings up when they're landing. And a few of the ones that were observed, fragile forktail, I put that one on there because it's a good one to know. It's the most common dragonfly in the East. So chances are if you see one, it's probably this. And an easy identifier, if you get a good enough look, you just need to see the thorax here. See this little dot and then this long dash. It's supposed to look like an exclamation point. If you see that, that's a fragile forktail. Males or females or immatures, they all have it. If you really start looking, you'll notice about half of all damselflies you see might be these guys in some places, so or more. Another one was a common basket tail. It's a dragonfly a lot of people don't see or at least notice. It comes out very early. They do last through the summer. A little bit smaller than some of the bigger dragonflies. Pretty variable with the color, so sometimes hard to tell if you're just getting started. And swamp darner, another one, good one to know, pretty common. These guys like to hang out in dark wooded areas. They do generally come out dawn to dusk, but you can't see them again in the understory during the day. And if you see them land, they're probably going to land like this, hanging down like that. Very pretty. And then common whitetail. This is a good one. This is, again, one of the more common. This is a female. This is a male. She's got a few more spots on the wing, whereas the male only has these bands on the outside, a little bit on the base, but it's got this bright white tail, and it looks powdery. If you see a dragonfly near the ground, not going very far, very quickly for a dragonfly, good chance it's one of these guys. All right, then for Orthoptera and the grasshoppers. These guys are going to see a lot more later in the summer, but right now we only had a few records. So they can be winged or wingless. Most of them are going to look like this, what people are used to. If they do have wings, they have this hardened forewing, which is the tegmina, and that's protecting the back wings because they're down in the grass, vegetation a lot. They want to protect those so they can still fly. And they've all got these long hind legs and enlarged femora, which is obviously for jumping. Most of them jump pretty well. Some of them are crawlers more than jumpers, but they've all got these big back legs. And of course, chewing mouth parts, known for eating a lot of vegetation. Green striped grasshopper was one of the observations, and not surprising, it's one of the most abundant in the east. And the nymphs actually overwinter, so they're burying themselves down a little bit all winter, and then they emerge. And so no surprise that this was one of the early ones that somebody saw. And then we had one of the shield-back katydids. This one, immature. You can always tell if they're immature because, you know, they don't have, even ones that are mostly wingless usually have buds on them. Now these guys, they're mostly going to be in detritus, hanging around in bushes. So you don't see them as often, but they are out there and they will be out there all summer. All right, so the mantids. A lot of people know this, very charismatic. They've got the raptorial front legs. So the praying, in the part of the praying mantis, are these long forelegs that are used to grab insects. And with them, they actually, this whole part right here is actually just part of the thorax. So all the way from the head down to that last leg is thorax. So they got a really long thorax compared to most orders. And the head is freely movable. So, you know, if you've ever looked at one, they can actually turn their head all the way around. Not 360, but a long way, which for most insects, it's, you know, they can barely move their head at all. And the only one of these we got was, as an observation, was a Chinese mantis. Not surprising, again, it's the most likely mantis you're going to encounter. Unfortunately, it is introduced. And this is what the adults look like. They can be, you know, all brown mostly, or, you know, a lot of more green. But they always are going to have this green stripe on the wing here. And then this is the egg case. It's that styrofoam looking egg case that you see a lot. Now, they're, again, voracious predators, and they especially target pollinators, which isn't great. Most people think, oh, mantises, just as general, are good. But they're just eating whatever they can get. And for a big insect like this, they can, you know, they can get 6-7 inches long. They're getting the biggest prey they can, which is a lot of time bees and butterflies. They do have an orange dot on the chest, which is also, if you get close enough, you can tell it's that versus European mantis, which is similar. And insect toxins don't really affect these guys much, and I'm going to get into that in a second. Now, just to compare it to our native mantis, the egg case on the Carolina mantis is going to be more elongate and not as puffy looking. And they generally look like this. They're kind of mottled brown. Sometimes they have green on them, but their thorax and head is actually going to be a lot longer than their abdomen. Whereas with the Chinese, you can see the abdomen is about the same length. This is a little skewed image, but it's about the same length versus this. Now, Chinese mantises, like I said, often pick off pollinators. Now, I was doing a survey this summer of pollinators, and unfortunately, I saw a ton of this. So a big mantis, usually almost always females, will post up on flowering plants and just wait there for butterflies to come in. And when I went, it was in August, so it was during migration. And I started to notice, you know, just a lot of monarch wings on the ground. And at first I was just like, oh, something ate it. But then I noticed it was under every plant, and there was always one of these guys. And then I started picking them up. And this is what I found. At least 40 individuals, wings that I found underneath about 10 plants. And so that gives you some idea of just the numbers that these mantises are just taking out every year. And I mean, monarchs in particular, but any pollinators. So while I'm not going to say you should go kill all the mantises you see, if you are confident that it is a Chinese mantis, it may not be a bad idea for your natives in your garden if you would remove it in some way. and maybe even, you know, make a nice little mount like this guy here. Just okay, so on to our next order. Isoptera, the termites. Oh, but wait, they are no longer their own order. They actually are in with cockroaches, which seems strange, but they both they have a common link. And unfortunately, usually at the rally, we can find this one kind of cockroach, that lives up there. And it is actually a social cockroach. It takes care of its young and eats wood. So it's kind of the link between termites and all the other cockroaches. So we're just going to, we'll talk about termites though, because they are very different than most cockroaches. The adults have 4 wings, but only in the reproductives. They have a case system. So they're going to have the reproductives here, male and female, to mate. These ones here are soldiers. So sometimes they have big jaws, sometimes they shoot chemicals. One way or another, they're there to protect the colony. And then most of them are going to be the workers here. This is what most people think of when, you know, when you bust open a log, that's mostly what you're going to see. And somebody did find termites, but again, it just went to order. They are very hard to identify. If you get the soldiers, it's a little easier, but just the workers, I couldn't do it. So not surprising we didn't get past that. All right, so the other half of that order, the cockroaches. So head is underneath this pronotum here. So it's protective covering. That's why they always kind of look hunchback. The body is always going to be oval and flattened. And wings are usually present, not always, but usually there. They don't all use them, but they're there. And we had a couple, unfortunately, last time I looked, no natives cockroaches have been seen. There are some, like I said, that one, the true wood roach, is only found in the Appalachians. That's the one that eats wood. And then there's some other, they're also called wood roaches, but that's the general term. They can be found out just in the leaf litter. But I'm pretty sure both of these that were found were in somebody's house. So the oriental cockroach, it's actually originally from the Caspian Sea. Males have long wings and females have short wings, but neither one of them fly. And the American cockroach. Most people know these, also called palmetto bugs, if you're down south especially. Now, they're actually native to Africa. So even though they have the American cockroach name, they're not from here. So that's unfortunate. And they probably came over during the slave trade. So that's another thing that, another strike against them. All right, now Dermaptera. Unfortunately, didn't find any of these in iNat during the week. But pretty sure everybody has heard or seen these guys, the earwigs. So they've got these forceps-like cerci on the back. And some of them do pinch, some of them just for show. And they all have chewing mouth parts. They're detritivores. So they're not getting in people's ears. I don't know how it started, but I won't say they'll never be in anyone's ear because that's going too far, but that's not where you're going to find them normally. And now we're going to get back to the aquatic insects again. So the Plecoptera, the stoneflies. Now these guys, similar to the Mayflies, but they're only going to have 2 of these filaments on the abdomen. So if you find one, it doesn't look like there's, you know, a broken off filament here, then it's probably going to be one of the stoneflies. And they're only going to live in fast flow, usually fast flowing, always well oxygenated water. So they're good for checking the quality of water. Mayflies, some of them only live in high quality water, some of them just live wherever. So they're not as good as the stoneflies with that. And they also have the gills up here on the thorax, unlike the Mayflies, which have them on the abdomen. So another way to tell them apart. Now as adults, terrestrial, they fly around. The wings look very flat on their back. And somebody did find one. It's the yellow Sally stonefly. Looks like this. It's one of those ones. It's not the giant, but they're fairly large, ½ inch to 1 inch long, and they do have this yellow coloration to them. So glad we found at least one. Now hemipteran, the true bug. So bug is a general term for insects, but it's incorrect. unless you're talking about these guys. Now, Hemiptera means half-wing. So these guys, they have a thickened portion of their wing, but only the front. The back of it is just membranous on the forewings. So that's why they got the name half-wing. It's a very diverse group. Not the biggest one, but it has a lot of different body forms. But they all have piercing, sucking beaks. So they're either going to be sucking on plants, as with a lot of the hoppers, scale insects, aphids, cicadas. But then some of the true bugs, in particular the assassin bugs, and some of the stink bugs are mostly plant eaters, but some of those guys will actually either pierce other insects or humans. If anyone's ever heard of the kissing bug, it's mostly down in South America, but I have found some up here in Virginia, and they will, bite you. They can spread a disease, but mostly it's going to be going after smaller stuff. And we found quite a few of these, no surprise. One, if you didn't know the name of it, now you do, the brown marmorated stink bug. That's the one, most likely if you find stink bugs in your house in the fall or winter or spring, it's this guy. Introduced not that long ago, only about 30 years ago, but it's spread everywhere. So that's what that guy's name is. Another one, native, much prettier, is the eastern box elder bug. These guys do go only on box elders, and there you can see that there's my example for the nymphs. They just got the wing buds, nice and bright, so things know not to eat them since they are poisonous. Another one, semi-aquatic, is the common water strider. So a lot of people call these water spiders, but they are striders. It's a true bug. And there's only about 3 species of these in the East. So most likely, if you've seen a larger one, it's probably this, the common water strider. And they just float along with surface tension, eating small insects in the water. And the hemlock woolly delgid, another non-native. This one was introduced pretty far back in the 20s, but it's spread all over the U.S. Unfortunately for us in the East, the Western hemlocks do a lot better against it than they do in the East. So it spread here pretty hard, as most people know, and killed off a lot of those trees. But yep. All right, so now we're getting, this is my favorite order, the beetles. And it's also the most successful order. So these guys, there are over 350,000 species that have been described already. So it's gigantic. And the reason for their success is because of this hardened forewing, which is called the elytra. And it protects them. Some of these guys, like some of these beetles, are just tanks. But they still have that membranous hind wing, so they can still fly. So they've got kind of the best of both worlds. Some of them are pretty terrible flyers, but they can still get around. Now the larvae, most of these, like we talked about earlier, are unsclerotized. So, got the grubs, pretty soft-bodied. You're going to find them underground or in logs and stuff. A few of the observations we had, one was the horn passalis. A lot of people call these best beetles, but they're unique because this right here is an adult, the black one. This here is recently metamorphosized one, so they'll be red until their elytra fully sclerotizes, and they actually live in little family groups. I couldn't find a picture, but I've seen before the black, the red, and grubs all together. So they live together in this wood. The adults take care of the young. Pretty unique in most insects in general. And then the false bombarder beetle. These guys are very common. You turn over a couple logs, you'll probably find at least one running away from you. They do secrete a chemical, but they don't actually spray it at you, so that's why they're the false bombarder beetle. Another one, the brown rove beetle. I wanted to put this up here because rove beetles are really neat. They've got these short elytra here, so it looks very strange, just an exposed abdomen here. But they've also actually have their wings folded up underneath them, so it's like unfolding a tent when they fly. They're mostly going to be eating either dead animals or fungus. And then another non-native, the emerald ash borer. I'm sure everyone's heard of it. Again, it wasn't introduced that long ago, back in the 90s up in Pennsylvania probably, but it's spread over the Midwest. It's moving south now. You know, it's been in our area for several years now, and the ashes are really suffering. So we know it's around, but if anybody does see it, there are places you can contact just to let foresters know that they are around your area. Unfortunately, I don't have a link to that, but you can look it up easily. All right, the six-spotted tiger beetle. This is my favorite family within the beetles. So there's a lot of different tiger beetles. This one, very striking. You see this a lot of times walking along paths or dirt roads in the spring and summer. They get their name tiger beetle because of these super fierce jaws they have. And they're just, yeah, awesome predators. This is actually one that I caught just back in March. So pretty cool looking guys. And I like them so much. One of my friends actually made me a little picture of me as the tiger beetle king. So that's me. Moving on. So the order Megaloptera. So these are the Dobson flies or Helgamites. A lot of fishermen are familiar with this if other people aren't. The adults, they have these big old wings. They do fly pretty clumsily, but they can do it. And they're sexually dimorphic. So this one here is a female with her short jaws, and this one's the male with the really long ones. Ironically, the males can't bite when they're adults. I mean, they can very lightly put them together, but it's mostly for pushing other males around. Females can still bite though as adults, so be careful. And the larvae, these are seen a lot of times in streams. They have these projections on the side, mostly just for stability because they're usually in fast-moving water. They don't actually have gills on those projections. They also bite pretty hard, so careful. And, sorry, there was one seen, the Dobson fly adult, but there's only one species in the east, the eastern Dobson fly. So easy to identify. If you see one, that's what it is. Now order Hymenoptera. This is a pretty diverse order as well. It's got the bees, wasps, ants, sawflies. Now the adults, they've got that thin waist. You can see it in the ants, the wasps, and the bees. And they all have an ovipositor, even the non-breeders, which is sometimes modified into a stinger. Obviously, only females sting, but that's most of Hymenopteras. There aren't a lot of males. And the larvae, a lot of people don't realize, are these little gooey guys. Most of them are going to be grub-like, especially in the social ones. Caterpillar-like, that's mostly with the sawflies, which is a smaller part of the order. A lot of people don't know about them. So we've got the blue orchard bee was one of the observations. This is a really cool one to find. They can be fairly large or small, but they've got this really pretty blue that is very striking, especially when they're in like an orange or white flower. They're only going to be out from March till May. So finding one of those is nice because you don't have a lot of time during the year to do it. Eastern carpenter bee, that's one that I'm sure most people know of. They're the ones that are hanging around your house, either drilling holes to lay eggs or just hanging around them. Now the males are the ones with the white face, and the females have an all dark face. So if you want to do something kind of nerve-wracking, if you grab one of the males, you can actually lightly hold it in your hand and it will buzz like crazy, but it can't actually do anything. Also, if you want to seem brave to other people, you can do that. Now, everything in your mind is telling you to let that go because it's going to hurt you, but as long as it has that white face on it, it can't. So, cool trick to try. Don't tell me how it goes. Now, I would be remiss as an entomologist if I didn't talk about the murder hornets, since they've been so all over the news lately. And it's a good story, but I'm going to get into the facts a little bit. So it's the giant Japanese hornet. If you've seen it on the some of the documentaries, They're known for attacking honeybee populations and massacring them to get to the grubs. But in the US, there's only been 3 verified sightings. There have been more sightings, but no others have been verified. So there's not a lot of them here. The prospect of them spreading across the US is pretty minimal. And right now, there have only been those couple sightings in Washington State. So unlikely you're going to see these anytime soon. Now, if you're curious to kind of see what they really look like in comparison to other things, this is the giant hornet. Now, this has got to be a queen because this one is gigantic. And it's compared to some of these other ones. This is a European hornet, which is one we have around here. Now, this one here, I think, is a little better size comparison. So this is the Japanese killer murder hornet. This is the European, and then this one here is the cicada killer, which both of these we have in the East. You can see the cicada killer is actually a little bit bigger than this one. And I have one here, if you look at my video for a second. Here it is. So, I mean, this guy, that's a pretty big one. And I would say it's, it's less than 2 inches, but it's bigger than these Japanese hornets. So, like a lot of things, this has been hyped up by the media. They actually found the first ones last year, so I don't know why it's hitting now. But you don't have to worry about it too much. All right, so order Trichoptera. These caddisflies, larvae or aquatic. They actually spin silk. So that's how they make all these cool cases that you'll see. Some of them just do silk. Some of them make these stone cases. They all have the sclerotized head to kind of cover up the top of whatever they make to protect themselves. And the adults, they've got these wings here. You can kind of see in this, you can see these little hairs sticking out. That's how they got their name. This hairy wing is what their their name means. And we did have one caddisfly seen, but I looked at the picture, I couldn't tell what it was. So it's some sort of caddisfly. So we at least found the order. Lepidoptera. We had a lot of observations of these, no surprise, because a ton of they're very charismatic. A lot of people like to take pictures of them. I'm only going to go into a few specifically, but now these, they do have scales on their wings. That's how they get their color. Now, contrary to what you may have heard, you can actually, the scales will come off, but they can still fly. They look very dull. There is some evidence it decreases the efficiency a little bit, but they're not going to die. So as long as you don't actually mess up the wing itself. Now, adults have mouth parts that are made into a proboscis, which is a drinking tube. That doesn't mean they all eat, though. A lot of the moths, especially, like this big guy here, it won't eat while it's an adult. So again, it's got a ticking clock to try to breed before it runs out of energy. Now, the caterpillars, they all can spin silk, mostly to use to make their cocoons or chrysalis. And they're one of the ones that have these extra legs, but they're really just projections that they move with their body. They can't actually move them independently, so that's why they're not real legs. But if you see one, you're like, that doesn't look like an insect. It's got too many legs. It's fine. It's still an insect. Now, one of these guys that's good to point out because it's pretty unique to our area is the Appalachian tiger swallowtail. So it's actually a hybrid of the eastern tiger and the Canadian tiger swallowtail. Now, this hybridization happened about 10,000 years ago, so it wasn't recent, but that's how it arose. So it's pretty unique. You don't see a lot of times that we can say for sure that something was a hybrid. That's how it became a species. And we humans only described this about 15 or 20 years ago. So it's pretty new to us, even though it's been around a while. And it's only found in the Appalachian Mountains. That's where the tiger swallowtail and the Canadian swallowtail overlap. Now, it is difficult on the wing to tell them apart. The Appalachian is larger and paler. So this Appalachian, this is tiger. And when they're sitting, of course, it's like, oh, that's easy to tell. But when they're flying, it's a much different story. Now, you can also tell if you get them sitting out like this, the Appalachian has this more of a V with the yellow down at the base of its wing, whereas the tiger, it's a little more rounded down here. So on the top, that's other than just the how pale they are and how much black, that's another way to tell. Oh, and the Appalachian only flies from early in spring to early summer, so they don't have more broods like tigers go all year. And the eastern tiger, the best way, if you can see the underwing, eastern tiger right here, this row of yellow circles, and the tiger, you know, it's pretty well separated. These are either circles or crescents, whereas the Appalachian swallowtail, sometimes it's a complete, sometimes it's just got more square and very thin black bands between them. But that's really the best way to tell. And I will say, from looking at a lot of them, a lot of times one feature isn't enough. You kind of have to look at multiple to be like, oh, that's definitely what it is. So something to practice IDing when you're in the field. And the other butterfly I'm going to talk about is the monarch. So a lot of people know a lot about the monarchs. They've been in the news a lot. They're doing quite badly because of pesticide use and habitat loss. The eastern population is doing a lot better now, still way below what it used to be, but it's doing better. Western population is still tanking pretty hard. So this is one very charismatic, easy, you know, a few plants in your yard of any kind of milkweed is going to help it out. So it's something you can easily help. Now, I'm going to talk about the migration a little bit because most people have a general idea, but it's actually really complex. And so anyway, here's a map of their range. This is the eastern before the Rockies, and then the western is over the Rockies. Now, the western population, they're only going to migrate from the Sierras down to coastal California. So they don't go where all the other population goes. That's why they're a separate population. Now, the eastern species, they're going, you know, all over the U.S. They start heading south. Now, a few of them, especially, well, particularly on the East Coast, they get lost and they go down into Florida. So there is a resident population down there that never leaves, but during the fall every year, a ton of them funnel down into here and put their genetics down in that population. So genetically, even though this population never moves, it's the same as this one because it's constantly getting that input. And then also in Florida, some of them keep going and will go to Cuba or Jamaica, the rest of the Caribbean islands, and maybe even to some montane areas in Belize where they have a different overwintering population that hasn't been found yet. But there's evidence, people have done studies and they found them here down in the Caribbean, and they've also seen them flying over the Gulf this way. So few more legs of that journey than what most people know. Now, some of them along the East Coast figure out where to go, and eventually most of them funnel down into the Mexican mountains where millions and millions, formerly billions, of butterflies hang out in the mountains down there until spring. Now, in the spring, Western population goes back to their mountains. Now, the Eastern goes up along the Great Plains and then goes through the Midwest into the rest of the country. Far and away, they don't cross the Appalachian Mountains on either way of the migration. They just don't like to do it. They might go along it, but they generally don't like to go, especially in the spring, don't like to cross them. If you do go along the coast, so we had an early sighting in iNat, and that's probably a few of them went up the East Coast, Gulf Coast, I'm sorry. But far and away, mostly you're going to get them going across the Great Lakes region into the Northeast, and then during the summer they move down along the mid-Atlantic states. And at least for me, in my garden, I usually don't get anybody on the milkweed until July. So that works, you know, anecdotally, that works for me. But all this has been verified with genetic sampling. So just kind of a much more complex process than most people know about.
And we did have one question, Shawn, about butterflies.
Yep.
Ali asked if there are increasing trends of monarchs appearing in Southwest Virginia earlier and earlier each year. And I don't know if this is, Ali, singleton or not, but I know that we did have several on our butterfly count we did last Sunday.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. In the literature, at least, I haven't seen anything about that. And like I said, there was a paper that I found that did talk about them not going over the Appalachians. Now, maybe for some reason, with the, maybe they're just moving super early and they're moving up here, earlier in the year for us, or maybe they are crossing them now for some reason and just they haven't figured it out yet. So unfortunately, I don't have any information on that, but that's why you do, stuff like that, like butterfly counts, because it can hit those trends as they're happening rather than 20 years from now being like, I wonder why that happened. So another good thing to do for surveys and citizen science.
Great.
All right, just a few more orders to go through. Don't worry, I'm not going to hit them all. We'd be here all day. So Mayflies, the scorpion flies or the hanging flies. Now these get their name from a projection the males have on their abdomen, which you can see here, looks like a scorpion's tail. They're all going to be predatory. This is a hanging fly here, eating something. That's usually how you see them, just hanging like this with something in its lower legs. And males of both kinds, they will actually bring a female a nuptial gift, as it's called, for her to eat. And if she likes it, then they'll mate. If she doesn't, then he has to try again. So behavior you don't see a lot in insects. And I think we had one of those, and it was just order. So now Diptera, the flies, another big order, pretty diverse. They are unique in that they only have one pair of wings. So you can see, especially on this crane fly here, these four wings, but then these back wings here, they're actually modified structures called halteres. And that's part of the reason why flies are so agile in flight. They actually use them as like gyroscopes. And so it allows them to turn a lot quicker because of that, because they can move that weight. That's why you almost never swat a fly if it's in good shape. And then the larvae are maggots. We've all seen those in rotting or other material. This one down here is a crane fly larva. You'll find those in wet areas. They can get quite big and gross looking, pretty gross. A lot of different mouth parts, piercing, chewing, all sorts of stuff. They have a lot of different strategies. So a few of the observations we had, one of them was the common picture wing fly. So this guy here, it's pretty small, but if you've ever seen these kind of multicolored wings, and when this fly is walking, it'll actually wave those wings above it, signaling to other flies. So it's pretty, it catches your eye even though it's fairly small. Then the common flower fly, this is a type of syrphid. There's a lot of these, very close looking. But this one's interesting because its larvae actually eat aphids. And then the adults are big pollinators for plants. So it's kind of a beneficial insect on both ends of its life cycle. All right, and then just to show you, these are all the other orders. A few of them, lacewings and thrips. Those are ones that we could have seen now, but we didn't pick up. Walking sticks will be later, and some of these other ones are pretty hard to find. So, but they're all out there, pretty interesting. Won't get into them right now. So, how many insects, and this is number of individuals, are there all over the world at any given moment? Does anybody want to venture a guess on the chat, maybe?
Yeah, chat's a good spot. Anybody? Bruce, you still there?
Just start hitting zeros. You probably, yeah.
I don't think anybody's willing to go. Oh, here we go.
Okay, there we go. All right. Getting. All right. So lots. Yes, that is correct, if not specific. So this is the number, and that's 10 quintillion. And to put that in perspective, that's about 2 billion insects for every human on the planet. So we always know there's a lot of insects, but that really, to me, I mean, it's unfathomable number for the human mind, but still, like, just to think there's that many insects out there at any given time is pretty astounding. Maybe a little less now, but still tons. And speaking of tons, the biomass of all those insects is about 30 times more than all the humans on Earth. So not only do they, you know, weigh more than us, but they weigh a lot more than us. Anyway, so something to consider. There's a lot to learn from these insects. Now, usually we would go out then and catch them. Probably good we didn't go out today because it's really cold. They don't love that. Maybe we would have found some dead insects, but you guys can go out and try to find some more. There's still another day and few hours of the rally. Maybe we can get some more of those orders on there. A few resources I was just going to tell people about. If you are interested in catching insects yourself, bioequip.com. It's a small company, but it has everything you could need from nets to mounting stuff, aquatic equipment. It even has like books and kits for kids for you know, insects catching. So good place to go. And I did just see that they were just able to open back up. So they're going again. And then iNat is really good for getting general ID for some common insects or bigger, good picture insects. It works really well. If you really want to deep dive though, bugguide.net is the way to go. It does an incredible deep dive into all the insects, and there's experts on there where you can submit pictures and they will help you identify it. So that is a good way to go about it. And there's my email. I don't know all the insects, not even close, but I'll do my best. If you feel like just shooting me an email or have a question about anything more specific you don't really want to ask here, I'll try to tackle it if I can. So with that, I'm done. So open it up to any questions anybody has, or yeah.
We do have a Sherilyn Thacker. I don't know if you can see questions the way I have your screen, but she would wanted to know, where would you look to find caddisfly cases?
Okay. So with caddisflies, always going to be in aquatic places. They're one that you can find them in a lot of different types. I mean, some of them live in ponds. Mostly you're going to find them in smaller streams, sometimes in rivers. The kind of the stone rollers, the ones that make the stone cases, those are going to be in mid-sized to large rivers. So that's one a lot of people want to find. There's some of them that make stones into, looks like snail shells. It's a circular pattern. Those are also ones that are going to be in faster moving mid-sized streams. So that's the best way to find the larva. Now the adults, again, anywhere near water, especially little like in May, June, even into July, you'll find the adults flying around, and those guys, they'll go a little farther from water, but near streams and stuff is the best place to look for them.
Cool. Heather Bunch wants to know if there was any surprises in this week's observations.
I honestly was a little surprised with the monarch, but other than that, I'm trying to think. Nothing too surprising. I was a little surprised with the mantis that it would be around yet. And I was happy with some of the finds, because some of them, like that rove beetle, and some of the others are a little different. The orchard bee is another nice one. And then Bruce found that one, oh shoot, the early, that one butterfly, whatever Bruce found. That's a good one. I'd never seen that one myself. So, yeah. So there were a few, but mostly I was just glad people were out there finding things.
Yeah, I was just looking on our website, on the iNaturalist site. There's 164 species of insect.
Yep, and it was only like 140 yesterday. So people are still getting out there. So glad to see it.
Yeah, 400 observations, 164 species, and that's just in insects.
Yep.
And I think it was the second largest group beside plants. So So I think we had plants was first, insects was second, birds was third.
Yeah.
I think we went to fungi 4 as far as what was actually being found.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yes, and Bruce Grimes, did you see this picture of his beautiful early hair streak?
Early hair streak. That's what it was. I was blanking on the hair streak. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was jealous of that. Oh, and Aaron found a harvester too. It's
yeah, 2 of them.
yeah, I've never seen one of those either. And they're unique because they're the only caterpillar in the US that is carnivorous. They actually eat aphids on willows. So pretty cool.
He found 2 here at the center grounds.
Yeah. Well,
so that was pretty cool.
Now I'm really sad I didn't get to come.
Right. And then as the monarchs, I think that we found, correct me if I'm wrong, I just sent the report in, but I think we had 6 total.
Wow.
But on the northern side, so on the Chilhowie side of the count, and not on this white top.
I'm surprised because even when I did surveys last spring in, I think, well, it was either it was early May on the Eastern Shore. I only found 1, and I was out there for a whole week. So
wow,
that's pretty good.
So we have this person, Chris, who has one other thing he mentioned in the chat box about catching fireflies. Is someone still catching fireflies and buy them from us backyard folks? I don't know really what that means, but
so they back in the day, oh shoot, I'm gonna forget now, but there was the chemical that they have in them, we couldn't synthesize it. And so companies would pay to, I think it was a color of some sort. And so they would pay people to catch them and then send it to them. And of course, each, firefly is pretty insignificant, but, people would send probably millions in. And, they marketed it mostly to kids. Anybody could do it, but, they get something like a penny or, a penny for 10 or whatever. I don't know what the exact amount was, but you could do that. And that's kind of that. I think that kicked off the real craze on catching fireflies. I mean, it's, of course, you just want to do it because they're interesting, but and that didn't help fireflies at all. They're not doing as well for other reasons, but for a long time, it actually it really depressed the numbers. So they've come back though, because that doesn't happen anymore. But it was something that happened, and you could get paid for it. So, sorry, entrepreneurs, that's over now.
Thank you.
Yep, that's right. Yep, that's what it is. The luciferase.
Yes.
Yep.
Cool.
The bioluminescence they have.
Yeah. Anybody else with any questions for Shawn? All right. It looks like we're pretty good, and I think everybody's appeased. This is recorded. We will be taking all of our recordings and uploading them to our YouTube channel as quickly as somebody else besides me can do that, because I'm not real good at that. But we will get these webinars out to you guys that weren't able to attend as fast as we can. And I want to thank you guys for participating today. I will be sending out some emails tomorrow for the webinar and invites for tomorrow's webinar. So we have 3 or 4 more good ones. We have Ashley Peel with the Virginia Breeding Bird Atlas. We have Nancy Adamson with some pollinators. And we have Ben Castile with edible wild plants. And I'm thinking about seeing if I can't put something together for some kiddos. So I will be sending out an email this evening. You guys have a great rest of the day and night, and we will see you tomorrow. Thank you, Shawn.
Thank you guys for coming.
All right. Good night.